The city slept beneath a blanket of soft rain, its streets glistening with the reflections of 1,000 forgotten dreams. Midnight hung heavy in the air, thick with the scent of wet earth and the distant hum of life that refused to die completely, even in the loneliest hours. She walked slowly across the bridge, her coat pulled tight against the cold, her heart carrying the echo of a name she hadn't spoken in years. The river below shimmered faintly, restless and alive, like the memory she'd spent so long trying to forget. Then, through the silver haze, she saw him, standing where the light met the fog, his figure half hidden, yet achingly familiar. For a moment she thought the night was playing tricks, but when he turned, when his eyes found hers, the world fell away. It was as if every unfinished word, every half-kept promise, every silent prayer had brought them back to this one fragile instant. She didn't move at first, neither did he. The distance between them felt like a lifetime, and yet just one breath. He took a slow step forward, his boots splashing softly against the wet stone, his voice breaking through the sound of the rain. "I never stopped looking for you," he said. She wanted to speak, to tell him how the years had changed her, how she had tried to forget, but all that escaped her lips was a trembling sigh. A whisper that carried more truth than words ever could. The rain thickened, drumming softly around them, and still they stood, two souls caught between regret and rediscovery. When she finally moved closer, the night seemed to hold its breath. He reached out, his hand hesitating midair, as if afraid she might vanish again. But she didn't. She lifted her hand, slow and sure, and when their fingers touched, warmth bloomed like dawn breaking through storm clouds. No words followed, they didn't need them. The silence between them spoke in a language older than forgiveness, older than time itself. She could feel his heartbeat beneath the cold, could feel the pulse of something sacred stirring back to life. The city lights blurred around them, and the only thing real was the closeness they had both feared and craved. He leaned forward just enough for his breath to brush her skin. A tender promise of everything they'd lost and everything they might still find. It wasn't a moment of grand declarations or desperate confessions, but one of quiet recognition that love, real love, doesn't fade with distance or time, it simply waits for courage. The rain softened to a mist, and in that fragile stillness, she closed her eyes. When he gathered her into his arms, it wasn't to claim or to keep, but to remember, to hold the echo of all they had once been and all they could still become. Beneath the moonlight, they stood entwined, not as strangers rediscovering each other, but as souls finally finding their way home. And as the clock chimed once more, midnight felt less like an ending, and more like a beginning written in the language of rain, silence, and the quiet, unyielding truth of love. The night stretched on, soft and endless, wrapping them in a cocoon of moonlight and rain. The world outside the bridge seemed to fade, no passing cars, no footsteps. No noise but the rhythmic whisper of the river beneath. For the first time in years, they weren't haunted by the past or afraid of the morning that would come. They were simply there, two silhouettes painted in silver and shadow, holding on as if the universe itself had bent time just for them. She could feel his heartbeat slowing against hers. Not from distance but from peace, the kind that comes only when all running has ended. His coat was damp, his hair clinging to his forehead. Yet his eyes burned with a warmth that made her forget the chill around them. He looked at her the way one looks at something both fragile and infinite. And in that gaze, she saw every reason she had ever waited. "You came back," she whispered, not as an accusation but as disbelief given shape. He smiled faintly, the same half-smile she remembered from a lifetime ago. "I never really left," he murmured. "I just lost the road." Her heart twisted, remembering all the nights she had stood in this very place, wondering if fate had forgotten her. But now, fate stood inches away, real and trembling and human. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch careful, reverent, the kind of touch that remembers everything it ever missed. Their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them, a fragile truce between what was and what could still be. The rain fell softer now, tracing silver lines down their faces, erasing years of sorrow like forgiveness made visible. When she leaned into him, it wasn't just closeness, it was surrender, not to him, but to the truth she had tried so long to hide. That she still loved him. That she had never stopped. And when his arms circled her, the world seemed to shift, every sound and shadow bending toward that single heartbeat they shared. She could feel the warmth of his breath near her temple, the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath her hands, the unspoken promise in the way he held her that he was done running, done pretending. The bridge lights flickered above them, casting a golden shimmer across the water, and for a moment, it was as though the stars themselves had come down to watch. The city, vast and indifferent, held its silence, allowing them the grace of this midnight confession. When she finally pulled back, her eyes glistened not from sadness, but from the impossible beauty of knowing that after all the lost years, after all the sleepless nights, they were here again, alive, forgiven, and seen. "We don't have to go back," she said softly. "We can just start again." He nodded, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. "Then let's start here," he whispered. And in that moment, beneath the slow-falling rain and the endless sweep of night, they did. The bridge became their world, not a place of endings, but of new beginnings written beneath the hush of midnight and the promise of dawn yet to come. Would you like me to continue with paragraph 3, the next part of the story, in the same romantic, cinematic? Dawn was still hours away, yet the night had begun to soften, its edges blurring into something tender and alive. They sat together on the bridge's low wall, hands entwined, watching the reflections ripple across the dark water. The silence between them felt different now, no longer heavy with unspoken pain, but gentle, healing. He told her about the years he had spent chasing noise to drown out the quiet she left behind, and she listened, her thumb tracing slow circles on his palm. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a faint scent of jasmine and stone. A stray gust of wind brushed her hair across his face, and they both laughed, the sound small, fragile, but real. In that laughter was forgiveness, and in the way they looked at each other, there was something even deeper, recognition. Not of who they once were, but of who they had become, people shaped by distance, yet still drawn together by something neither time nor fear could undo. When he rested his forehead against hers, the world seemed to fall silent again, as if listening to the quiet pulse of two hearts finding their rhythm once more. The moon drifted lower, pale and drowsy above the city skyline, casting their shadows long across the bridge. They rose slowly, still holding hands, reluctant to let go of the stillness that had wrapped around them. The streets beyond were beginning to stir, faint headlights in the distance, a whisper of morning waiting to be born, but here, time still bent itself around their closeness. He looked at her as though memorizing every curve of light on her face, every quiet tremor of breath, afraid that if he blinked, the moment might dissolve. "Do you think love can survive everything?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and brushed his thumb over her lips, a touch so light it felt like a question. "Only if it's real," he finally said. She smiled, a small, tired, beautiful smile, and leaned her head against his shoulder. Around them, the city breathed again, but for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. The first colors of dawn began to brush the edge of the sky, delicate streaks of rose and gold melting into the fading blue of night. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving the air fresh and still, every drop on the bridge railing glittering like tiny stars reluctant to die. They stood there in the quiet afterglow, wrapped in the fragile peace that only comes after storms, the kind that isn't loud or triumphant, but soft and complete. She turned toward him, studying his face in the dim light, the way his eyes carried both the weight of regret and the spark of something new. "It feels different now," she said quietly, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who has finally stopped running from herself. He nodded, his expression unreadable at first, then slowly breaking into that familiar, uneven smile she had once known by heart. "Maybe because it's real this time," he said. His words hung in the air, gentle but sure, and in them, she heard the promise of something they had never managed before, not forever, not perfection, but a beginning without fear. She stepped closer, their hands meeting again in the thin light. Around them, the city began to stir, the distant hum of buses, the soft clatter of shutters rising, the faint laughter of early risers greeting a new day. Yet it all seemed far away, background noise to the quiet rhythm they shared. He lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over the steady beat beneath. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "It used to race whenever I thought of you. Now it just feels calm." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe that's what love is supposed to feel like," she whispered. "Not burning, Not breaking, just peace. For a long moment, they stood without speaking, watching the horizon blush into morning. The bridge that had once been their place of parting had become their beginning. She leaned her head against him, and together they watched the first sunlight touch the surface of the river, scattering gold across its restless waves. The wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the scent of newness, of life, of hope, of forgiveness. He turned toward her, brushing a raindrop from her hair, and in that simple gesture was 1,000 words left unsaid. She met his gaze, and for the first time in years, there was no doubt, no hesitation. Just truth. "Let's not promise forever," she said softly. "Let's just promise now." He smiled, pulling her gently closer, their foreheads meeting as the world brightened around them. "Now," he echoed, his breath warm against her skin. The city was awake again, but they lingered a little longer, two hearts stitched back together not by chance, but by choice. As the sunlight spilled over them, washing away the shadows of everything they'd lost, she realized that love was not something found in the fire of passion or the ache of longing, but in the quiet, steady warmth that remains when the night finally ends. And as they walked away from the bridge hand in hand, leaving behind the echoes of midnight, she knew that they hadn't just rediscovered love, they had rewritten it.